Welcome to the Functional Medicine Radio Show with your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga, known internationally as the Functional Medicine Doc. Dr. Carri is committed to helping patients find the root cause of their health problems and fixing the cause with natural treatments so they can feel normal again. Dr. Carri is the founder of Functional Medicine Ontario and is the author of the hit book, Reclaim Your Energy and Feel Normal Again. Please welcome your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga.
Hello everybody, and welcome to the Functional Medicine Radio Show, the only internet radio show dedicated to giving you real solutions to improve your health. Not only are they real solutions, but they're natural solutions as well. Because as you know, the one and only true wealth you have is your health. I'm your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga, the Functional Medicine Doc, and I'm committed to helping you find the root cause of your health problem, fix the cause with natural treatments, so you can feel normal again and live your life to the fullest. I'm so very excited about today's show because my special guest is Dr. Stephen Sinatra. Let me tell you a little bit about him. Dr. Sinatra is known as America's #1 integrative cardiologist. He's also certified as a bioenergetic psychotherapist and nutrition and anti-aging specialist. Dr. Sinatra integrates psychological, nutraceutical, and electroceutical therapies in the matrix of healing. He's the founder of HeartMDInstitute.com, which is an informational website dedicated to promoting public awareness of integrative medicine. Dr. Sinatra, thank you so much for being back today on this episode of the Functional Medicine Radio Show.
Oh, it's great to be here, Dr. Carri.
So today I wanted to pick your brain about grounding because I find not many people out there are really talking about it and the science behind it, and maybe we should just start with what is grounding and how long has that been around for?
Well, it's been around ever since, caveman medicine was described, thousands of years ago. But basically, it's a situation where, with modern man now, you put your bare feet on the ground, whether you're walking at the beach or whether you're putting your feet on concrete or grass. Asphalt won't work because it's man-made. But any natural substance on the earth where the earth is conductive, and what I mean by conductive is that the earth is struck by lightning, let's say maybe thousands of times per minute, particularly along the equator. So the earth is endowed with multiple electrons. So when you put your feet on the ground and you're walking barefoot on the ocean, let's say on the sand or on grass or on concrete, just to mention a few, what you're doing is you are absorbing these gazillions and gazillions of electrons through what we call the K1 point of the foot, which is an acupuncture point in the foot, which actually goes back through your spine and around, all the way around to the vagus nerve in the brain. And what really happens is that you are assimilating these electrons. It's like taking handfuls of antioxidants. And when you're doing this, you're raising the body to a different level of energy. In other words, simply stated, from all the research that's been done, you are sort of activating more of the parasympathetic nervous system with the sympathetic nervous system, and you're putting your nervous system in balance, and you're absorbing all these electrons that act like antioxidants against free radicals. So it's really a sort of a caveman approach. But it absolutely works in putting out the fires of inflammation in the body because, again, you're offering antioxidant support through the feet, and when you do that, you're putting the fires out in the body.
Now, how did you stumble upon grounding?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I met Clint Ober. He was a cable TV guy years ago. He worked in Silicon Valley with a lot of the early Microsoft researchers. I mean, he knew all the big names and worked with them side by side. And basically, he stumbled upon grounding. He was sick himself, and in a nutshell, he realized that if you're disconnected from the earth, and I'll never forget it, when he and I met, we met in Southern California about almost 15 years ago, and he was telling me he was watching people walk by him, and he was looking down at their feet, and he was seeing that they were on sneakers, they were disconnected, they were on neoprene, and he suddenly got it that one of the reasons why we have so much illness in America is that over the last 60 years or so, we went from leather to rubber, to neoprene, to all these non-conductive substances on the soles of our feet. And when this has happened, he was putting it together, and basically the advent of type 2 diabetes surfaced significantly in the mid-50s to early 60s. Other illnesses seemed to increase. So when the computerized age came at the same time, when we were replacing leather with rubber and neoprene, he got this enormous connection that perhaps it was a disconnection from the earth that was causing the problems. So when we met several years ago, 12, 13, 14 years ago, when we met, I said to him in a nutshell, I said, Clint, all you got to do is prove with clinical research that, you know, the theory of grounding is so essential in the aspects of inflammation and disease, and then you have something. You can sink your teeth into this. So literally, he spent millions and millions of dollars. There's been more than 20 plus sort of placebo-controlled trials done on grounding in multiple periodicals in the medical literature. And over the last decade or so, he literally has orchestrated the research. The research has been published, and it demonstrates that grounding literally, like I said before, sort of squelches or knocks out the fires of inflammation. And if you believe, like I do, that inflammation is the root of all disease, including cardiovascular disease, and then grounding becomes a perfect antidote for looking at the pathology of all diseases, whether it's heart disease, cancer, arthritis, you know, lupus. I mean, any of these illnesses that we see in modern day man.
So I understand that you've done some research on grounding too, and that you co-authored a paper on blood viscosity and another one on heart rate variability. So can you tell us about your findings?
Sure. These were two of the greatest experiments I've ever done. I mean, I've been a cardiologist for about 45 years, and I have to tell you that when I did this research, it actually blew me away. One of the first research papers I did was on heart rate variability. Now, heart rate variability is getting more and more common as a term in the medical literature, and it's not just mentioned among cardiologists these days. I mean, you know, people who are involved with the brain mention it. You know, regular doctors are looking into it, and really, heart rate variability is very simple. It's a message that your heart is giving that you are out of sync with your body. In other words, if the heart could talk, the heart is giving you a message that, quote, something is wrong. And one of the experiments we did is we looked at 20 plus people, and we looked at their heart rate variability before and after grounding. And what we realized was that when we grounded the people, there was an improvement in heart rate variability, and it was a massive improvement. It wasn't just like 30 or 40%. It was like 266%, which meant that the instant you put your bare feet on the ground, there's a regulation in heart rate variability that strongly suggests that you're deactivating what we call a sympathetic nervous system, and you're recharging the parasympathetic nervous system. So you're bringing the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system more in balance. Whenever you do this, you are literally reducing the aspect of cardiovascular disease, because it's been shown that disturbed heart rate variability is not only a prognosticator in cardiovascular disease, including heart attack, but sudden death as well. So when you regulate heart rate variability, you are doing an enormous impact in regulating the cardiovascular system. And when you're doing this, you are literally cutting down on the incidence of cardiovascular disease. So that paper, when I realized this, and you know, I used to speak about cardiovascular risk factors, smoking, hypertension, inappropriate diet, emotional stress. I mean, all these factors are important. But if you have something that can regulate heart rate variability, that can help prevent cardiovascular events, including sudden death, this was huge, Carri. I mean, this was unbelievable. And when I stumbled upon this, I thought this was the greatest research I've ever seen in my entire life as a cardiologist. In fact, I was so excited about it I submitted this research to the American Journal of Cardiology, Circulation, and I was shocked. I was saying these major cardiovascular journals were turning me down. I said, my God, this was the greatest research I've ever stumbled upon in my entire life, and the journals didn't believe it. I mean, I was absolutely, mortified. I was shocked. And then finally we sent it to one of the alternative medical journals, and they grabbed it immediately. But I feel it was one of the greatest papers that I've ever written. And then we did a follow-up paper, and on the blood viscosity. Now remember this, that blood viscosity is a measurement of how thick your blood is. So if your blood is like red ketchup as opposed to red wine, that means that the blood is inflamed. And whenever the blood is inflamed, this is a major problem, because inflammatory blood predisposes you to inflammatory vascular disease, including stroke, heart attack, etc. So again, this was an amazing concept, where not only did grounding have a positive impact on heart rate variability, but now we demonstrated it had a positive impact on thinning the blood. And whenever you can thin the blood and get more oxygen to the peripheral tissues, including the heart, this was an amazing discovery. So again, I just couldn't believe the discovery that simply putting your bare feet on Mother Earth could do this much for the body and the heart. So this was another study that we published, and again, I was very grateful for the funding of the study via Clint Dober to this message out. It was profoundly healing, especially for the cardiovascular population.
I can definitely hear all the excitement in your voice, and I can only imagine how thrilling doing that research and getting those findings, how thrilling that actually was. So is grounding something that anybody can do? And if so, then what are the easiest ways to ground?
Well, I mean, what I do, the easiest way is to get back to leather shoes. Or you can buy grounding sandals. It's sort of it's a type of rubber on the sole of a sandal that is conductive. It may have metals inside the rubber or silver. But I have to tell you, just wearing leather, even the interview right now that we're talking, I went out for a walk this morning. I put on my leather loafers. I got out of bed. I had a little bit of a stiff back, which I normally have in the morning. But I have to tell you, when I walk outside and just walk on the grass and walk on concrete, and just the aspect of walking, helps to loosen up, spastic ligaments and tendons and, muscles that we have. But when you add the walking to, again, the grounding, and now you're giving your body, billions and billions of electrons, it's like taking antioxidants at the same time. So now the combination of walking, which is really good for the lower back, but you add the antioxidants, you get it through your feet, through a conductive shoe, which is leather, as opposed to, let's say, neoprene, or like a sneaker, or rubber, pure rubber, without silver chloride in it, or silver electrodes. You're disconnected. And when you're disconnected from Mother Earth, you're not getting the anti-inflammatory response that Mother Earth offers you. So, one of the first things I do in the morning is when I get out of bed, I simply walk grounded, either barefoot. I'll tell you, one of the easiest things to do for a lot of people is, if they get out of bed and if they just walk outside, especially if there's a little dew on the grass in the morning, now the conductivity is even more impressive, especially when you have a liquid on the soles of your feet, like condensation of water. So I just feel that in my life and the research that I've done, I make it a point to walk grounded, even if it's only for a few minutes every single morning. Now, I also sleep grounded as well. I mean, I sleep on conductive sheets. I have a pillowcase that's grounded. I use a belly band. I mean, there's so many different ways of making contact with Mother Earth. But again, simply walking barefoot, or if you don't want to walk barefoot, for whatever reason, walking on leather is one of the easiest ways to get back to the energies and the healing and the enormous healing potential of Mother Earth.
Now, Dr. Sinatra, are there any instances where a person should not ground themselves? Like, is there any reason grounding would be contraindicated?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's some work by some people in the world that they talk about dirty electricity, and they might have a point. I mean, I've been through this back and forth with, PhD physicists and Clint Ober and other researchers, and, there's controversy about this. I mean, look, first of all, I wouldn't walk next to a grounding. I wouldn't ground myself next to an electrical station. We've seen lots of these. For example, where these plants are generating electricity, and maybe the ground adjacent to them, might be contaminated. Although I have heard so many researchers tell me that the Earth trumps everything. I mean, the amount of the energy in Mother Earth trumps any certain areas. But, I've read research by others where, high tension wires, the ground below high tension wires might be contaminated. The ground, next to electrical systems or high energy systems, may be contaminated. I mean, again, I've heard, arguments from both sides of the fence. I mean, what I tend to do is I tell people to, be cautious in certain areas where, if you live next to a power station, maybe you shouldn't take your shoes off and walk on that ground adjacent to that power station. I mean, that sort of makes sense to me. So, but 99% of the Earth is perfectly pure. I mean, that's my opinion. I might be wrong. Others may disagree with me. But I can tell you, people in the grounding movement just feel that the Earth trumps everything because of the massive nature of the Earth. But again, I would exercise on the side of caution. I think it needs to be a little more research. Sure, quote, that dirty electricity, may be a factor, especially in adjacent ground that can be contaminated. I will say one thing, that over the centuries, if you look at Western Europe, a lot of churches were built on areas that was, quote, sacred ground. And if you read books, and one researcher actually was from Canada. He lived in Montreal. Dr. Carri. He wrote the book, Biogeometry, and in his book, he used to talk about the Roman legions who would walk from point A to point B. Now, they didn't walk from point A to point B, the closest segment. They would walk around and go to point C first and then to point B, because they knew on certain roads that if the Roman legions were involved in battles, that their soldiers would heal faster walking in certain areas in Europe. So, the ground has a very unique healing capability. And again, legions in the Roman Empire, the commanders knew this, and they would literally use the earth as a healing power. So, again, in a nutshell, I believe that 99% of the earth is really healing. And again, there may be some areas that may be not as healing or not as conductive to the enormous amount of electrons that cause healing to the body.
And Dr. Sinatra, can you tell us about your book called Earthing?
Oh yeah. Actually, the latest book that I mentioned, Earthing, there was a whole chapter in it. Was Health and Relationship Heaven and Earth. That was the book I wrote with Tommy Rosa almost a year ago. And in that book, when Tommy Rosa was, run over by a car, this is a true story, and it happened about 18 years ago. When he was run over by a car, he was dead, and then he was revived, and he was placed on a ventilator in the intensive care unit. He was on a ventilator for a few weeks, and he survived the event, but he went to heaven and back. He was more than a near-death experience. He was really a death experience that spent time in heaven, and he learned revelations about healing. And one of the revelations he learned about was grounding. And when he told me this story, it was just absolutely amazing. That what I've been preaching, for the last decade, is something that he learned from the ascended masters in heaven. That connecting to Mother Earth via the ground was absolutely a healing modality. So there was a whole chapter in Health Revelations from Heaven and Earth about grounding, and I was so delighted that Tommy related this to me because I'll be honest, when we wrote the book Earthing, and that was the first book that we wrote years ago, about 5 years ago on Earthing, we came out with another edition. And the book's been published in 20 languages. We've had some pushback from people on Earthing, but when Tommy went to heaven and he got the message from the spiritual ascended masters, Jesus Christ in particular, when he got that message, to me it created enormous joy in my heart because it revealed the truth that we were really onto something. So, we've written about the book Earthing is really good. There's a lot of clinical studies in that book. There's a lot of good stuff you can sink your teeth into. But the latest book was, again, Health Revelation from Heaven and Earth, where we got acknowledgement from the Ascended Master that grounding was absolutely good. Important in your overall health.
So for the listeners out there, I did interview Dr. Sinatra on a previous podcast, and we talked about that book, and then I also interviewed Tommy as well. So I'll make sure that those two links are in the podcast notes if you're interested in listening to either of those two interviews. They were phenomenal.
That's right. Yeah, I remember we had our interview, Dr. Carri, but I forgot we did interview Tommy separately. That was really good.
Yeah.
I would like to listen to that podcast myself. It was great to hear Tommy talk, because it's amazing. I've known him for several years now, but every time he talks, I always learn something new. Something else pops into his mind that I never heard before. So that would be great to hear again.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've taught us so much today about earthing, and that there is some really good, solid research, solid science behind earthing. It's not just some hippy-dippy kind of a thing. There's real science behind it, and that it helps the parasympathetic nervous system, which helps you rest, digest, helps with heart rate variability, helps to thin your blood, so helps with overall decreasing inflammation, helping with multiple different diseases in that aspect. Is there anything that we have not talked about that you think is important for our listeners to know?
Well, yeah, I think there's one more thing, and you sort of mentioned it. Basically, whenever you ground, you're regulating a lot of the hormones in the body. And one of the papers that came out, and I did not participate in that paper, but I read the paper and I knew the researcher, is that whenever you ground, you have a regulation of cortisol, which is one of the hormones that go up with stress. And emotional stress, even physical stress. And one of the biggest factors in the world today is the lack of sleep. People don't sleep well today. That might be due to a variety of factors. A lot of people are under emotional stress from anything from international tensions to, tensions in their own country. There's lack of work in countries. There's a lot of problems. But, one of the things that is causing, enormous sleep disruption is the electromagnetic environment in the world. In other words, all the computers, the cell phone towers, these waves that we can't see, feel, or touch, but they're interfering with some of the aspects of our body, the physiological aspects. So if you have any listeners out there who find that they don't sleep well, one of the best ways of helping that, and I'm not a big believer in taking sleeping pills or anything to put in your body to sleep well, but if you sleep grounded or if you ground, you may help your sleep cycles. And to me, that's an important pearl, because sleep is absolutely restorative, and we need good sleep, and especially if we get into REM sleep. We're repairing the body while we sleep, and grounding definitely helps a lot of us sleep better.
And I will say that after our first interview, Dr. Sinatra, I went online and I found the grounding sheet for my bed.
Oh, okay. Great.
Yes. So that's one thing that I've been using, so I can say that does help me sleep better.
Oh, great. So, see, that's important, because, again, whenever you sleep better, you're repairing the body. And, people who don't sleep well, people who have sleep apnea, wake up every hour, men with prostate disease, they get up in the urinate and they can't go back to sleep. Whenever you break up sleep, several sessions in the middle of the night, this can have deleterious effects on the body. So the fact that if anybody sleeps better, sleep is restorative, especially dreaming and REM sleep. That's very, 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 very helpful for the body.
Dr. Sinatra, are there any resources if people want to learn more about earthing and grounding? Are there any resources that you recommend?
Sure. I mean, the earthing.net website, I believe, is good. Grounded.com is another website. Actually, my website, Vervana, VERVANA.com, we have a lot of information on earthing and grounding. Even on my commercial website, my vitamin and mineral website, drsinatra.com, I have information on earthing and grounding. Honestly, Dr. Carri, since I discovered earthing and grounding, more than a decade ago, and especially since I've contributed, or I've done personal research into it, I believe that this is so important in health. I included it in my 5 pillars of healing. So now we have a 6th pillar, and that 6th pillar is earthing and grounding, along with a non-inflammatory diet and exercise and taking vitamins and minerals. Grounding is so important, and we must put it in our everyday life. So that's why I've mentioned it on all my websites. It's vitally important that we all have to get back to Mother Earth, because Mother Earth is just such an enormous healing modality. We all need healing. We all need healing. So it's important for us to wrap our arms around this and really put it into our daily activity.
So for the listeners out there, I'll make sure to put all of those links that Dr. Sinatra mentioned in the podcast notes, so that you can easily find Dr. Sinatra and his websites and all the information on grounding and earthing. Dr. Sinatra, thank you so much for being my special guest today. Again, this has just been an awesome interview.
Thank you, Carri. It was a lot of fun. Thanks so much.
All right, that wraps up this very special episode of the Functional Medicine Radio Show with Dr. Stephen Sinatra. And I want to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in today. And I'd like to invite you back next week for another episode of the Functional Medicine Radio Show. As always, I'm your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga, the Functional Medicine Doc. Have a great week, everyone.
You've been listening to the Functional Medicine Radio Show with your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga, known internationally as the Functional Medicine Doc. Dr. Carri is committed to helping patients find the root cause of their health problems and fixing the cause with natural treatments so they can feel normal again. Dr. Carri is the founder of Functional Medicine Ontario and is the author of the hit book, Reclaim Your Energy and Feel Normal Again. Please tell your friends about the Functional Medicine Radio Show, and we'll see you next week with more from Dr. Carri.